Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. This is Jenny Shanker from the Center for Student Success, and thank you for being on this morning. We have a little less than half of you on. I know that we might have some people who are running late or not able to attend because of the weather, so if you just give us about 5 minutes, we'll get started. Thanks. Good morning. We are pretty stable at the number of attendees, and so I don't want to keep those of you on the line from waiting too long. So I think we'll go ahead and get started with the Michigan Student Success Center for Student Success portion of the broadcast. This is Jenny Shanker, as I said, and I'm here. Well, I'm virtually here with my colleague Erica and with some of our presenters this morning, including Lexa Logue and Peter Adams, are on the line. Later we'll be joined by John Hetz. And we're here today to talk about developmental education. And I just want to, first, before I get started, those of you who are attendees, if you could raise your hand if you hear me by clicking the little hand button in your control panel. Okay, cool. If people are having trouble hearing me or need to communicate with us while on the webinar, you're all muted. So, okay, this is looking good. Most people seem to be able to hear me. There is a question pane in your control panel to enter a question if you have one during the webinar. And there's also a chat box where you can send a message to everyone in the audience or to only those of us who are organizers if you need any assistance. Erica and I will be monitoring the chat and the questions during the webinar, so we will be able to hopefully address anything that comes up. And our presenters will we'll be monitoring questions for our presenters as well. So let's go ahead and get started with our virtual student success meeting. This has become kind of a tradition for us. As you can see, it's a tribute to the weather in Michigan. So I've got some icons on my opening slide that indicate what's going on around the state. Hopefully everyone is somewhere warm, dry, and safe, which is the intention of holding this meeting virtually rather than asking people to come in. Our agenda, we have a terrific agenda I'm very excited about. We're going to first hear a little bit about our experience with developmental education from the perspective of the Center for Student Success. We're then going to hear from Alexandra Logue from CUNY about their success with co-rec mathematics. We're going to hear about addressing non-cognitive issues in a co-rec classroom with Peter Adams, who has spent quite a bit of time in our state, so we're happy to welcome Peter back to Michigan virtually. And then we're also going to hear from John Hetz from California about the work, the really exciting work they're doing with multiple measures and GPA at the in California. And then finally, just a few minutes on wrapping. At the end of the meeting, I will wrap up with a few final thoughts from the Center for Student Success. So I'm actually going to let Thomas Brock, the new director from the Community College Research Center, cover most of my talking points in this presentation. But basically, he put out a letter kind of welcoming, welcoming himself to his new position at CCRC, and kind of broke into it with the idea that we need to address these questions continuing to swirl around developmental education, noting that the preponderance of studies from CCRC and others are showing that for large numbers of remedial students, isolating them from their peers in college-level courses and assigning multiple semesters of remediation greatly reduce their chances of completion. And so they basically have found through multiple studies that the traditional way that we have been doing developmental education is not working for most students. A number of alternatives have emerged over the past 10 years or so. And one of them is this idea of the Math Pathways course. Math Pathways is a system which assigns students to mathematics that corresponds to the program of study that they're interested in. So it's an alternative to having all students complete a sequence of courses that leads to college algebra or to calculus, which is what the original college algebra pathway was meant to lead to students taking calculus, and instead direct students into courses like statistics or a quantitative reasoning course, which prepares them for careers and studies in social sciences. Statistics might prepare you better for a career in social sciences. Quantitative reasoning might be appropriate math for a more liberal arts field. And so what the initial report is finding with some research with the Dana Center, CCRC has found that students who are in math pathway courses were nearly 50% more likely to pass a college level math course after 3 semesters. So the evidence is suggesting that taking math that is relevant to your program is effective and works. Another alternative is the notion of co-requisite delivery. ALP was one of the first and most well-known co-requisite methods. And since ALP has taken the country by storm, many other states and colleges have taken on co-rec in other subjects such as math or reading. The basic concept is that the student enrolls in the developmental support course and the college level course at the same time. The developmental course reinforces the work in the college level course, and the student is much like astronomically more likely to complete both courses and certainly has the advantage of being able to complete both courses in a single semester. And it basically plugs that leaky pipeline by, making sure that students who complete the developmental course don't have the chance to not register for the college level course, even if they were successful. Another alternative is to reform placement processes. When I was a little developmental educator and went to the Kellogg program, the Kellogg Institute, I learned about how effective placement tests were, and that this is really the very best way to determine what a student's skills were, which was to ask them to perform those skills on the spot. And since then, we have seen evidence emerging that, and if you've ever tried to take a placement test yourself, you might agree with this, that perhaps being asked to perform skills on the spot is not the best way to determine if a student is ready to be successful in a college course using some of those skills. And so colleges have been experimenting with various other methods of placement, or with using other methods in combination with the placement test, and have been seeing a lot of success in helping more students place into college level courses, which then of course allows them, as you will see when we start John's presentation, statistically huge increase in their odds that they will actually complete the college course no matter where they fell in the placement spectrum. So in Michigan, we have not been completely, we have been actually fairly active in developmental education. We have had ALP in the state since 2012. We've had 19 colleges who participated in our rounds of ALP in the early years of this decade. My God, that's very scary. We have had guided pathways, which has addressing developmental education as one of its tenets. We've been working on this since 2014. We have had math pathways to completion in conjunction with the data center, which we just are wrapping up. We just wrapped up in 2018, our participation in that. But in 2018, we still had 54.2% of our students placing into one or more areas of developmental education, according to the data that gathered for the governor's dashboard. That's at our community colleges. So we still have a fairly significant incidence of developmental education, which we have been working on addressing through these various initiatives. And I'm going to pause here and see, first of all, if anyone has asked any questions. And they have not. I see no questions yet. Great. If you have questions, please feel free to enter them in the question box. And I'm going to go ahead and go on, because I'm going to give you some data that I have discovered about our colleges. We have been, and some of you on the line may have been part of, in the process of updating our survey of practices in developmental education, which we first did in 2016. And some of you were maybe at the meeting which was held at Washtenaw Community College, where we first kind of introduced developmental education in a big guided pathways context. And so it had been about 3 years since we had that meeting. And so I thought, well, let's repeat that and see what has happened with our colleges. Now, I'll tell you about this data that you see here reflects 24 of our 28 colleges for 2019. It does reflect all 28 in 2016. I wasn't able to get all 28 to get their surveys finished before I had to make the slides for this meeting. So we may see a little bit of movement as we get those last 4 colleges in. But you can see the orange is 2019, the blue is 2016, and there has been some movement in adopting ALP. So we have an increase in the number of colleges who have fully scaled, an increase in the number of colleges who are scaling up, which means that they have 25% or more of their sections transitioned and they're moving towards scale. We have a 1 college reduction in colleges who say that they are not considering adopting something like ALP. In some cases, some of these not considering colleges are using a different form of acceleration. They might be using compression, where they're having students complete a course, a developmental course in a half semester, and then take a college level course in a half semester. That's another method that some colleges are using. I focused on ALP because that was the model that we demonstrated and that we adopted really in Michigan. And so that's why you'll see that these slides are going to focus on these co-rec adoptions. Also because, frankly, the literature is showing that co-rec is a kind of a primo method for moving numbers in terms of helping more students succeed in college level courses who might have originally been placed just in a developmental course. So you can see the adoption of ALP is moving somewhat. We have had some movement since 2016 with ALP. Not so much in math. Despite the work that we have done with our math pathways to completion work, and despite the success that colleges have seen with English and ALP, we still have most colleges report being in the thinking stage about co-rec math. Now, it's heartening that more colleges are in the thinking stage now in 2019 than were in 2016, which at least suggests that there's interest and pondering about the importance of doing something to change student success in mathematics courses. I think when you hear Lexa's presentation, you're going to feel like you better move from that thinking stage to the doing something stage as quickly as possible when you see what has happened with her students, because it's quite compelling. So a slower adoption for, and here I think I have a question. I see a question. Was there ever progress on STEM pathways for the right math at the right time? That's so I think you're talking about the STEM transfer programs that we're working on building transfer pathways to. I think, or are you? And if so, yes, we have done some work to identify the math courses for the STEM programs like biology, engineering. We have identified the pathway to calculus as those pathways. If you're talking about co-requisite or acceleration for preparation for STEM mathematics, I think that might see nationally that is kind of a sticky area, and maybe this is a question that Lex could answer when she's talking from the CUNY perspective. So in Michigan, we have not established a co-requisite. There's no established co-requisite course for STEM, but it's working on. We're working on it, and some colleges are working on it. And we've got another math question here. Oh, Carol answers yes for transfer as well as common pathway to calculus from algebra. Yes, thank you, Carol. You said that much better than me. Moving on from math, there's been a slight shift in placement thinking in Michigan between 2016 and 2019. So we have more colleges who are not considering only using AccuPlacer to place students, which is somewhat heartening, and fewer who are using only AccuPlacer. More colleges are experimenting with something related and putting the high school GPA in the mix, which is certainly reflecting current thinking out in the field. But it's, as you can see, it's a little slow and incremental. And then, so basically, what's the point of all this? We are thinking about some big goals. We would like to increase the number of students in Michigan who complete college level math and English within 1 year of enrollment. Based on our data from the Voluntary Framework for Accountability, about 25% of students from colleges who are participating in the VFA are completing college level math in 1 year. And we'd like to see that number move closer to 50%. We have achieved around 50% in English. It would be great to see that number move closer to 70%. And to have 40% of students be able to complete both college level math and English in their first year of enrollment. We'd like to see colleges decrease reliance on single measures such as AccuPlacer to determine readiness. We still have a third of colleges who are using AccuPlacer only. And so it would be really nice to see fewer colleges doing that as we move into the next kind of phase of our implementation of student success, the student success agenda in community colleges. Okay, I see. And then I'm going to pause here because this is all of the slides that I am going to do in this portion of the presentation. And I'm going to turn the controls over to Lexa. I want to make sure that she's available. We have Gail has, hands are up because I asked if people could hear me. And are there any more questions at this time before I turn it over to Lexa for her portion of the presentation? I'm not hearing any typing. Oh, wait, here we go. Somebody says, hang on. Where's, what is the evidence that more than, okay, so Brooke, you will see John's presentation hopefully later today, and he will be talking quite a lot about that evidence that more than AccuPlacer is more accurate or more. It's not so much. I think it's not so much that it's more accurate as that it's more effective for the students. The students are able to successfully complete the college level classes, and even if the AccuPlacer might indicate that they wouldn't, that there are better ways to determine whether students are going to be successful than by using AccuPlacer. Thanks, Brooke. Okay, any other questions before I conclude and turn it over to Lexa? Okay, here we go, Lexa.
Okay, Jenny.
You.
Jenny, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great.
Hear you. And now I'm going to make you the presenter. I'm very happy to welcome Alexandra Logue. Now you do need to click on show my screen. I'm sorry. I told you weren't going to have it do anything, but you have to click on show my screen. There we go. Really excited to have Alexandra Logue from CUNY with us today to talk about their study of co-requisite remediation with college level statistics.
Okay, thank you, Jenny, so much. And I appreciate everybody who's on listening, given what I hear about the weather in Michigan. It's not nice in New York, but it sounds much worse in Michigan. So anyway, I'm going to be speaking today about the 3-year effects of a randomized controlled trial that we did on co-requisite remediation involving college-level statistics. And my slides have stopped moving. So let's see. All right, Jenny, I hope you're listening and you can tell me what to do.
Okay, well, it should be able to advance just like you regularly would.
It was before, but now it's not.
Okay, well,
should I get rid of this panel showing main screen? That's the only thing that's different.
maybe, I mean, you can, if you click on the orange arrow, you could get rid of that. And then will that allow you to advance the slides?
No.
Okay. I have your slides and I'll bring them up and then you can just talk me through it.
This is very strange. Okay, everybody who's listening, this was working perfectly 2 minutes ago.
Okay, so Lexus, click on stop showing screen in your panel.
Okay, stop showing screen. Okay.
Okay, great. Now I need to get out of the full screen and I'll get your slides. Oh, right, I have closed my email. I apologize if everybody's now going to see my email. No, you're seeing my slides, maybe. All right, apologize. We're a short break. This would be a fine time to ask questions if you want to. Or to get yourself a cup of coffee.
Oh, that will take too long.
Oh, okay. No, yes, we'll be faster than that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now. And okay. All right. Let's try it. Like this. I got to show the web. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. All right. What's the deal? Oh, I have to be the presenter. Okay. So now I have to come back to being the presenter. And now we're going to show my screen. Okay. So now do you see? We should be seeing Lexa's slides. And we're going to view the slideshow.
Right.
Okay, so then Lexa, go ahead and just, let's see if they'll advance for me.
Okay, so people will let us know if there's a problem. Okay,
right.
So
okay, now I just
go back. Too
far. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, go back one more. Oh, you're going forwards.
All right.
Go backwards.
Go backwards. Okay, I gotta push previous every time. Let's end the show and start over. Okay. Start from the beginning. Okay, there we go.
Okay. All right. I'll say next. I'll say click when I want you to click.
Great.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So click, please. Okay. These are my two collaborators, Dan Douglas and Mari Watanabe Rose, and I just want to thank them and acknowledge them. Next slide, please. And the funding for this research is provided by the Spencer Foundation and by the City University of New York. And click, please. Okay, click again. This is about a randomized controlled trial that we did investigating the effects of co-requisite math remediation on student success. And as you probably all already know, co-requisite remediation is when you have assessed a student as needing remediation, and then, but instead of putting them into a prerequisite 0 college credit course, you put them instead into a college level course, but give that student extra support. So we're going to be talking here about doing that for students who've been assessed as needing math remediation. Click, please. And this initial research that I'm going to be telling you about was published in 2016 in Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis. Click. And that paper looked at the effects on the performance of CUNY students who were in associate degree programs through 1 year after the intervention being the randomized controlled trial. And click. We now have, which you're going to be hearing about towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to be giving you some 3-year follow-up data, including graduation rates for the students who were in this experiment. So click, please. All right, so just a little background, since you're all in Michigan, almost all in Michigan, about CUNY. Just so you know, CUNY has 19 total undergraduate colleges, and of those 19, 7 are community colleges, which have a total of about 97,000 students, almost 100,000 students. Those students are largely from underrepresented racial ethnic groups, so 68% Black or Hispanic. 39% of them were born outside the U.S., 41% first language other than English, 52% first-generation college students, and 65% of them are Pell Grant recipients. So we're talking about a population that has a lot of challenges before even beginning college. And for getting through college. Click, please. And some background information. The theory, click, please, is that if you assess a student as needing remediation, and then you put them into a remedial course, a traditional remedial course, which is a prerequisite 0 credit course, that's going to get these students prepared for college level work, and that's why people did this traditionally. Click, please. But the actual results of traditional remedial courses are not what was intended at all. So click. The course pass rates in these traditional remedial courses are quite low. In math at CUNY, it's generally around 35%. Click. The persistence and graduation rates of students who are assigned to these traditional remedial courses are quite low. Click. And as a result of having to take and retake, because of failure, retake these traditional remedial courses, financial aid can end up being depleted by the time that a student would get to receiving a bachelor's degree. And these are students, at least at CUNY, who are coming from very challenging financial backgrounds. Okay, next, click again, please. And the student loan default rate is quite high for students in this situation. And click, please. People have said, and I would too, that the civil rights of students who are being assigned to these courses are being violated, because they're being assigned to courses which do not help them and which are likely to result in their not completing college. I should say here, as I guess was sort of indicated by Jenny earlier, that there are more students who are assessed nationally and at CUNY. There are more students who are assessed as needing math remediation than who are assessed as needing remediation in reading or writing. And there are extremely high failure rates in the traditional remedial courses. And it is for these reasons that many people believe that math remediation is the single biggest block to students graduating in this country. Nationally, something like half or over half of students are assessed as needing math remediation. That's getting better because of the changes in placement practices that Jenny talked about, but it's still very severe, and they're assigned largely to these traditional remedial courses, and then they fail them. So, and then they can't, these students cannot graduate because they can't take college level math until they pass these traditional remedial courses. Click, please. This is a diagram done by the Community College Research Center that Tom Brock is the new head of, as Jenny also mentioned in her introduction. And it's a nice illustration of what happens in traditional math remediation and why it's so difficult for so many students. This is a diagram in which a student was assigned to, students were assigned to 3 levels of math remediation, because it's often, many colleges will assign to more than 1 level. So, meaning in this case, students have to take 3 courses of remedial math, traditional remedial math, before they can take the college level gatekeeper, what's called gatekeeper or general education satisfying math course. The Community College Research Center did a survey involving, or an analysis involving over 60,000 students. And what you see here is that students are dropping out of the pipeline from being assigned to remediation to passing the gatekeeper course, because not only because they are failing the individual remedial courses, but because they are not enrolling in the next course. They don't even enroll in the first course. Lots of students don't enroll in the first course. So when you have this sequence of courses, you have many potential exit points. In this case, we're showing 8 exit points before the student is going to end up passing. So of these over 60,000 students who started the sequence, only 11% ended up passing the college level gatekeeper math course. All right, so click please. What's the alternative? The alternative is, click please, co-requisite remediation, which, as I said, is assigning the student instead to a college level course with extra help. Click please. So some of the data that are supporting co-requisite remediation I've indicated here on this slide. Click please. And there's a reason this slide is complicated looking. Co-requisite remediation has been shown successful with college level courses in chemistry, math, reading, sociology, and writing. And this is a list of just some of the publications that support the use of co-requisite remediation in all these different subjects. We think one of the reasons, there are many reasons why we believe it's more successful. One is because it decreases the number of exit points that I was talking about, and the longer you make a sequence, the more opportunity is for something to happen in the student's life, and they're going to exit the sequence and never finish it. But in addition, it can be stigmatizing to be assigned to remedial, traditional remedial courses, and also these co-requisite courses allow the faculty the opportunity to design the support, the extra support the student is getting, to be directly coordinated with the college level material, so that it's what we call just-in-time support, and it is specifically to help with the college level material. Click, please. But even though there has been all these publications with all these different subjects, people said, click, that those data don't prove that co-requisite remediation is better. Click. Because those data are primarily descriptive. They're not experiments. They're just descriptive. They don't involve controlled studies. Click. The students in the co-requisite courses and or the faculty teaching them may not be the same as in traditional remedial courses. So Perhaps only the most motivated students go into the co-requisite courses, or the best faculty teach those co-requisite courses. And that's why the pass rates are higher and the students are doing better. And it's not because of the co-requisite structure itself. Click. And so people said, even with extra help, these students who are put into the co-requisite remedial courses, they're not going to be able to pass other college level courses. Okay, click please. So to assess these thoughts, we did a randomized controlled trial that was conducted in the fall of 2013. Click. There were 907 students divided among 3 CUNY community colleges who were all assessed as needing remedial elementary algebra. And these were also all students who did not need college algebra for their majors. And these students were randomly assigned to one of 3 course types. Click. So the first group, and these letters are going to come up later, so hopefully you can remember, group EA is a traditional remedial elementary algebra. So this is the control group. Click. Group EAWS is the traditional remedial elementary algebra course, but added on to that was a weekly workshop. Click. And then the co-requisite remediation group was consisted of students who were randomly assigned to group Stat WS, which was introductory college level statistics with a weekly workshop. Okay, click. And a couple of methodological details to how we did this experiment. Click. The students were randomly assigned in summer 2013 to courses that started in fall 2013. Click. The workshops, which 2 of the groups had, were the EAWS group and the StatWS group, were 2 hours per week, and they were led by advanced undergraduates. Click. Each instructor who was in the experiment taught one section of each course type, one section of EA, one section of EAWS, and one section of StatWS. In this way, we balanced instructor across the treatments so that any difference between the success rates of the students in the different courses would not be due to different instructors, but would instead be due to the actual differences in the courses. Click. There was evidence that the StatWS students were the most motivated of the 3 groups. Click. Group EAWS, now these are the students assigned to traditional remediation with the extra workshop, had the highest rate of summer melt. And many of you are probably familiar with that term. These are students who are accepted to college but never show up in the fall. And we randomly assigned our students in the summer, and the greatest percentage of students who didn't show up in the fall by far was in this EAWS group, meaning that, which suggests to us that if you assign a student to a very lengthy, time-intensive remedial treatment, that might actually discourage a student from attending college. And remember, I talked about that there are, in that diagram from the Community College Research Center, that a lot of students don't even take the very first remedial course. This could be why. Anyway, next click. The statistics students, StatWS students, were more likely than those in EAWS to attend their workshops. Click, please. And the statistics students were more likely to report forming their own study groups than were students in the other 2 groups. Okay, click. Okay, here are the course pass rates in fall 2013, and from here on in, I'm just going to be showing you the control group results, which are EA, and the co-requisite remediation group results, which are StatWS. And I'm doing that because we had so much attrition, so much summer melt in the EAWS group, that it makes analyzing their results statistically very complicated. So we're going to just stick with these two groups from here on in. And what you see is that the pass rate for EA was pretty close to what it usually is, which was 39%. But in the statistics course, we got a 56% pass rate. Okay, click please. Now, what this slide shows is that at that time, CUNY was using the compass for placement. And so what we have on the x-axis of this graph is compass scores, basically. And on the y-axis, we have the probability of passing. And the two lines are the two groups, Group EA, solid line, and the dotted line is Group Stat WS. And for both of these groups, what you're seeing is the higher your placement score, the more you were to pass the course that you were assigned to. But what is important here, that's not a surprise, but what's important here is that the Stat WS line is higher than the solid line, and it's higher by about the same amount, approximately, no matter what the compass score. So what this is saying is that you've got a better chance of passing the course if you're assigned to statistics, college-level statistics with extra help, the co-requisite course, even if you have a relatively low placement test score. So co-requisite remediation, this suggests that co-requisite remediation is not just for students who are getting relatively high placement test scores. It may be good for everybody. Okay, click please. But even though we had these results, people still said, click, the statistics students only did better than the elementary algebra students, the EA students, because the faculty were easier on the statistics students. Click. And these people also said for this reason, and because they never had the whole elementary algebra course that they were supposed to have, the statistics students won't be able to pass other courses. So click please. Let's see what actually happened. Click please. In terms of credits accumulated, not including statistics courses, so we're leaving out statistics, how many credits did the elementary algebra and the Stat WS students accumulate by 1 year after the experiment? Click. EA students, 16. Click. Stat WS students, 19. So even not including the statistics credits, the Stat WS students were accumulating more credits in the first year after the experiment. Click, please. And this diagram this bar graph shows the quantitative course status of participants in the experiment 1 year after the experiment ended. If you just look at CUNY, like most places, the students traditionally, they had to do their remediation and then they had to do their general education math course. If you look on the right side of these bars at the lightest gray shows that these are the percentage of students in the two groups who had passed a college-level quantitative course, in other words, their general education requirement. And you can see that by 1 year after the experiment, 57% of the statistics students had passed it, but only 16% of the elementary algebra students. So the statistics students were making far more progress. And I should mention, maybe this is obvious, but in case it isn't, passing the statistics course did count as satisfying the general education requirement and satisfying, and it was a college level course. So all the students who passed statistics are in this 57% for the Stat WS group there. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the data up to here were in the original paper that I told you about that was published in 2016. Click. This is the, and click. So this is the citation for that publication. And click, please. And that work was approved for the What Works Clearinghouse with a without reservations rating in March 2018. The What Works Clearinghouse is something that's associated with the Federal Department of Education, and it is supposed to house evidence of interventions that have been shown to work to help students succeed using very, very stringent criteria. Okay, so far so good. Click, please. But despite our randomized controlled trial, people said, click, that the statistics students will not continue to do well, click, because they never had the elementary algebra course that they need for their natural and social science general education courses. The argument has been that students need all this to go through this elementary algebra course again because they've already had it in high school, but go through it or they're not going to be able to pass intro bio or whatever. Okay, click please. So this is a diagram that shows the 8 CUNY general education categories that we have in our core curriculum. And the red bars are the percentage of students who within 3 years in the StatWS group had satisfied that requirement. And the blue bars are the percentage of EA students who had satisfied that requirement within 3 years of the experiment. And of course, as we've been seeing already today, if you look at the top, the math and quantitative reasoning category, which is where the statistics courses are, far more statistics students within 3 years had satisfied that category. But if you look, with the exception of scientific world, which is right under, is the second group down there, which is about exactly the same for the two groups, in every single other category, the statistics students, a higher percentage of them had satisfied that category within 3 years. Even in, look at the bottom one, English composition. And we think this is largely an effective opportunity in the sense that students who are put into traditional remediation, they usually fail that course or they never take it, and then they have to keep taking it, and they don't get as much opportunity to take other courses. All right, click please. But people said, click, the statistics students will not take and pass the math courses that need elementary algebra and college algebra as a prerequisite. In other words, you are, by putting them directly into statistics instead of elementary algebra first, you're depriving them of the opportunity to take college algebra, pre-calculus, calculus, etc., because those courses all go in a sequence. Click, please. On the other hand, if you make the students do the traditional remedial sequence and you make them take elementary algebra first, some of them are going to get excited by math so that they then take advanced math courses, but the statistics students won't have had that opportunity. So let's see what actually happened in the 3 years since the experiment. Click, please. This chart shows every single college level math course that was passed by the EA and the statistics students in the 3 years since the experiment. And if you look at the top row, not surprisingly, the statistics students had passed far more sections of statistics because that's what they were assigned to. And if you look at the second row, yes, the EA students had passed somewhat more sections of elementary algebra. That's not so surprising. I'm sorry, of college algebra. But if we go down, the courses in the box are what we would call advanced math courses. And what you see there is that the statistics students actually passing more sections of advanced math, more classes in advanced math than the EA students. And at the bottom row, the total, far, far more classes in math total were passed in those 3 years by the statistics students than by the EA students. In other words, being assigned to the EA group was actually a disadvantage in terms of getting students to take and pass advanced math courses. Click, please. But people said, click, that students who are assessed as needing elementary algebra, which all the students in our experiment were assessed that way, can't take and pass college algebra without passing elementary algebra first. Click. So let's see. Click, please. The number of statistics students who passed their assigned statistics course during the experiment, which was fall 2013, and later passed college algebra without ever having taken elementary algebra, and they had no additional assistance in doing this, was, click, 14. In other words, there were 14 students in our experiment. They were assigned to statistics in the fall of 2013. They took it, they passed it, and then they went on into college algebra without ever taking that elementary algebra course. And they passed the college algebra course. Remember, again, what this speaks to very likely is what Jenny talked about, is that the placement mechanisms are not as good as they should be. All of these students pretty much had algebra in high school. So that experience perhaps was enough to allow them to pass college algebra, even though they had been assessed as not being ready for college algebra. Click, please. But people said, click, if you don't make these students take elementary algebra, they won't be able to later change their mind and complete math-intensive majors. Click. So we looked to see which students, how many students had graduated within 3 years of the experiment with a major requiring college algebra or above. Click. There were 2 such students out of 297 assigned. There were 2 in the elementary algebra group. There were 5 in the statistics group. So there is no evidence here that if you make a student do the traditional remedial group, you're going to end up with more STEM majors. No evidence at all. Next slide, please.
Hang on just a second, Lexa. I have a question.
Okay.
How many students took the college algebra class? What was N? So how many students of your statistics group took the college algebra class?
Okay, I don't have how many took it, but in the previous slide, if you go back to that chart of the math courses, it shows how many passed it.
Right. Let's see if I can get back there. Oops. No. No. Previous, please. All right, now my slides are not working either.
It was
14 passed it.
Wait, I have it here in paper, so I can tell you.
Great.
32 students passed college algebra.
Okay.
And of those, 19 ended up passing pre-calculus, 14 calculus 1. So a lot of the students who took the college algebra went on and took more advanced classes in math.
Does that help? Does that help with your question, Brooke? Let's see if she's typing. Okay, but the slide did say 14 passed, she says. Now I can't get back. And
that's 14. That's 14 of people who did it in the soonest possible, that's some of the students went, after they passed statistics, they weren't supposed to, but they went back and they took elementary algebra and then went on to college algebra. But the 14 are people who never did that, who took statistics, passed statistics, then took college algebra without ever taking elementary algebra.
Okay, so there are two different
Yeah,
numbers.
it's two different samples.
Yeah. Well, some of these questions I think probably would be, we might have time to address at the end, and I can turn the microphone on. So Brooke, if you want to hang out and chat after Alexa's presentation's over, we can talk a little more about it. But maybe we should go on, presuming that my
Okay.
slides are still working.
Okay, because now we're getting to the really critical thing.
Right.
So people said, okay, click. Changing one course requirement, this one co-requisite course, isn't going to affect graduation rates, and it certainly won't increase graduation rates. Click, please. This diagram shows the graduation rates 3 years after the experiment was conducted for both the EA and the STAT-WS groups. So EA on the left, STAT-WS on the right. The darkest color, the black at the top, is the percentage who have received an associate's degree and enrolled in a bachelor's program, and just below that is the percentage who received an associate's degree but were not enrolled in a bachelor's program, and etc. You know, the white at the bottom is students who are not enrolled at all. And it's somewhat easier to see in the next slide. You could go to the next slide, which is a summary of the 3-year results. And what you see here, if you look at the right column, the far right column, after 3 years, 17% of the EA students had graduated, but 25% of the STAT-WS students. Click, please. So the graduation rate at 3 years, the graduation rate of the STAT-WS students was 8 percentage points higher than that of the EA students. Click, please. And because we're talking about low rates here, what that essentially means is that almost 50% more STAT-WS students had graduated than EA students by 3 years. And this is from one single course manipulation. Click, please. But some people said, and by the way, when I'm saying all these things, some people said they've really said them. This is not something I'm making up for a good presentation, but I've spent many years working with math faculty, so I've heard all of these things many times. But anyway, some people said, click please, because it took only a D to pass the statistics course, the STAT-WS, but a C to pass elementary algebra, the statistics course was easier to pass, and the students who passed it with a D must not have done well afterwards. So let's compare. Click, please. Let's look at the graduation rate of all EA students who passed EA during the experiment, and that was 28%. Okay, so in fall 2013, if you take all the students who passed elementary algebra, which wasn't a huge number of them, but you take those, and then you see how many of those, what percentage of those had graduated in 3 years, it's 28%. But now let's compare it to the students who passed statistics during the experiment, fall 2013, but they only got a D. 3 years later, 41% of them had graduated. So, in other words, passing the course by in any fashion, whether you got a D, a C, a B, or an A, and you did it in statistics, was a way to help propel you to graduation. Click, please. But some people said, click, maybe the statistics students graduated at a higher rate, but they won't do as well as the EA students after graduation because they won't have had the elementary algebra that people need for their jobs. Click, please. Click. Again, post-graduation performance. We do not yet have, we will have, but we do not yet have employment data for the students who were in our experiment. Click. But there have been 2 recent studies which have shown that for the great majority of jobs, algebra is not needed. In contrast, having taken statistics has been shown to help increase women's post-graduation salary. Click, please. And what about performance gaps, particularly racial, ethnic performance gaps? None of our results differ by students' race or ethnicity. Click. So what this means is that because students from underrepresented groups are more likely to be assigned to math remediation, and that's been well established, and because co-requisite remediation helps all students assigned to math remediation similarly, that means that if co-requisite remediation were universally applied, it would help decrease the graduation rate gaps between underrepresented and other students. Click, please. And if you're interested in the cost of education, click. Of all EA and Stat WS students who were randomly assigned in our experiment, click. The mean number of math courses that an EA student had to take in order to pass his or her general education quantitative requirement was 5.2. Click. But the mean number of math courses a statistics student had to take to pass his or her general education quantitative requirement was only 2.6. So it was half. And remember that the way we did co-requisite was we had the regular statistics course plus a workshop, and the workshops were led by advanced undergraduates, paid to work, do those workshops 2 hours a week. That's far less expensive than teaching a regular remedial course by an adjunct, which is usually who teaches them. Okay, click, please. So in conclusion, click. Students who are assessed as needing elementary remedial algebra and who are not majoring in a math-intensive major are more likely to pass the assigned course if instead they take college-level statistics with extra support. They are also more likely to graduate, including passing college-level general education, social, and natural science courses, and all types of math courses. Click. And this approach can help close performance gaps. Click. And click. Co-requisite math remediation works. Click. And thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Lexa. I want to give some time for questions, and if I'm gonna see, let's try this. I'm going to go to my attendees, and if you have a question, raise your hand and I will unmute you so that you can ask a question verbally. Or you can type your question in if you'd rather do that, and I'll ask it. But here's an opportunity we have some extra time on the webinar, so here's an opportunity to have a discussion. I really appreciate it. I think that Lexa, I have a question. One of the things in Michigan that we are, a lot of our colleges are implementing a quantitative reasoning course for students who are not taking the STEM course, and there's some conversation about whether statistics or quantitative reasoning is a more effective kind of accelerator for students. Do you have have you had any experience with quantitative reasoning or liberal arts math at CUNY, and do you have any kind of opinion on whether or not students who are directed into a quantitative reasoning course, assuming that would satisfy their math requirement, do you think that this would have a similar effect by delivering that as a co-requisite rather than having the students pass elementary algebra first?
Well, I don't have any direct evidence on which is better. In general, I think the reason, you'll note that in our experiment, we really were doing two manipulations, which were making a co-requisite course, but also we were changing from algebra to statistics. So both of those factors may have influenced the success of our students. Generally speaking, there is our experiment so far is the only published randomized controlled trial of co-requisite remediation. There are others in progress right now, but they haven't been published yet. And so there isn't yet super rigorous evidence saying, but in general, I would say that what's important is to direct the math that the student takes to their interests and their major. And a lot of work has been done, especially by the Dana Center, who you mentioned, Jenny, you mentioned earlier, showing that algebra is not needed, most algebra is not needed for many, many different majors. It's far less than some people think. And quantitative reasoning does contain some statistics. They're not totally independent courses. There's some overlap. So I believe that the general thinking is that if you're going to be a STEM major, if you're going to be majoring also in some kinds of business, any math-intensive major that really does use at least pre-calculus, that then you should go the algebra route. But if you're doing social science, anything that might need statistics, statistics is better. And for other kinds of majors, quantitative reasoning may be the best. But there is one other thought here, which is because students who have been assessed as needing remediation, they are so likely to fail that remedial algebra course. Even if they are going to be, they want to be a STEM major, a math-intensive major, it may be better to put them into statistics first. Let them have a positive, successful experience, and then go into the algebra calculus track. That may be a better approach.
Thank you. That's great. Appreciate the answer. Any other questions at this time? Please raise your hand or type something furiously, then I can see. Okay, I'm seeing something. Click to read the chat message. Oh, no, that's an old one. Okay, I think. Oh, I see. Here's some questions. Here are some questions. Oh, I see. Okay, never mind. Those are chats. Any other questions? Click to see whose hands are raised. Yes, all right. Question from Jordan Webster. Go ahead, Jordan.
Hi, my name is Jordan Webster. I was curious if you could speak a little bit more about that third group, the EAWS group that you said a lot of the data didn't actually apply to. I was just curious of the results and sort of the mixed results. I know there was a lot of melt, but just if you could speak a little bit more about those students.
Sure. That group, their pass rate was between the other two groups, so it was higher than the regular EA group, but lower than the Stat WS group. The statistical difference between the EAWS and the other two groups, they were not significant, but they suggest that the workshops were helpful also for the students who were in EA. But again, there was a lot of attrition between when they were randomly assigned to the course and then did they actually start the course. So you have to worry that the students who actually started the course were somewhat more motivated students or different kind of student than the ones who showed up for EA. But we're very suspicious because EA, the elementary algebra course, is a 4-hour course. And so when we added in workshops, that meant the students had to be in class 6 hours a week, and they were getting 0 credits for that and having to pay financial aid for that. And we're very suspicious that that was one of the reasons they didn't show up to college, that there was so much summer melt in that group. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, that's what I was looking. That was the sort of thing I was looking for. Yep.
Yeah, I think, with regard to summer melt, a lot of people are talking about summer melt these days and things you can do. And they talk about things like the FAFSA being so complicated, about students having counselors in high school who help them and people who help them once they get to college, but in the summer before, they may be in a vacuum of having good advising. But we think one thing that people haven't looked at and should look at more is so many students learning during that summer that they're going to have to take these really time-consuming, zero-credit remedial courses that they have to pay for. And it's just very, very discouraging.
Thanks. Okay, now I have another question. Hang on just a second. Let me get back up here. From Carol. Oops, Carol, you are unmuted. No, Carol, no, that was Brooke. Carol, you are unmuted now. Carol Davis. Oh, it's possible that she stepped away. Carol, are you with us? Okay, here's a couple more questions while we're waiting for Carol to be on. Oh, she doesn't have a mic. Gotcha. Okay. Her question is, can you speak a bit more on student success from stats to college algebra?
Not exactly sure what that means. Does that mean students who took the statistics course and then went and took algebra, or in comparison? I mean, these were all students who told us at the beginning of the experiment that they didn't want to do a math-intensive major. So these are all students who were unlikely to have careers later that would use algebra, which most careers don't. So I'm not exactly sure what else. There's maybe trying to think what this question is asking. Maybe it's about the fact that these students were able to do the algebra even though they never had, the statistics students, the Stat WS students were able, at least many of them, to do algebra, college algebra successfully without ever having taken the elementary algebra course.
And again, here's someone who followed up, Patrick. Could success in the stats class allow the student to take college algebra? I think this is like a policy.
Oh, well, okay, I got it. All right, yes, the way we set up the experiment, if a student passed statistics, the college was then supposed to allow them to take college algebra without having to take elementary algebra first. So I hope that answers the question. People may be wondering what was in these workshops. I didn't really talk about that because there was sometimes when people do co-requisite remediation, they put all kinds of stuff in the co-requisite part, which I don't believe is a good idea. What we did was to focus in the workshops on what the students were having trouble with in the college level statistics course. If what they were having trouble with was related to algebra, then that topic was covered in the workshop. But the workshops were not necessarily all, in fact, they weren't all about algebra. So it wasn't as if in the workshops they were getting the whole elementary algebra course. They definitely weren't. They were just getting some little bits that were useful for the statistics course. So you can't say that the reason these students were able to pass college algebra was because the workshop prepared them for it. That's not the case. What you have to say is either you can do college algebra without ever having taken elementary algebra, but like I said, all these students, almost all I'm sure, had algebra in high school at some point. But when they were assessed for their math placement, they were assessed as lower than what they were capable of doing, apparently, which is very common according to the Community College Research Center. I might add that the Community College Research Center did a big project where they said that something like a third of students who were assessed as needing math remediation could go directly into college level math with no extra support and get at least a B.
Wow. Okay, so reply from Carol that they've tried having students go from stats to college algebra and they were not successful, but they had not had any CORAC or workshop, so that they're having a different experience. I also have a note here from John to prompt people to look for the original paper that was published about from Jordan's question about the workshop, the elementary algebra workshop group. To make
Yeah, the 2016 paper has full data on that group.
Yeah.
Up to 1 year after the experiment.
Great. Let me just scroll through here and see if I see any other questions. Hang on. GoToWebinar is not my friend today. I see that, because I need it. All right. I do not at this time see any additional questions for Lexa, but if you see that her contact information is on the screen, I think that we will wrap this webinar up then a bit early, and we will reconvene for those of you who are going to join us for Peter's presentation on more about what kinds of things you can do in those co-requisite courses and workshops to support students' development and continued success, and kind of peels back the onion a little about what makes co-rec work. So looking forward to seeing many of you back here at 9:40 at quarter to 11 your time. I'm sorry, I'm in Texas, so my time is Central Time, so at 10:45 for Peter's presentation. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Thanks to all the listeners.
Okay, thank you.